The cold hit me first. Not the kind of cold that makes you reach for a sweater, but the kind that crawls up your neck and settles between your ribs. I blinked against the morning light and reached instinctively for the weight that had always been there, my hair. My fingers met air. I shot up in bed. Red strands, uneven and limp, littered my pillow like withered petals. My heart slammed against my ribs. I scrambled toward the mirror, already knowing, already dreading. The woman staring back at me looked half-finished bare patches across her scalp, jagged tufts where waist-length copper waves used to fall. My breath stuck. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a dream. Someone had cut my hair while I slept. Then I saw it. Taped neatly to the vanity, a pale yellow sticky note in my mother's tidy, slanted handwriting. "Corliss deserves her spotlight. You'll still look fine, love, Mom." I stared at it for too long, willing it to change, hoping I had misunderstood. But there, it was like a verdict. Neat, casual, calculated. I stumbled out of my room, bare feet slapping against cold tile, the hem of my sleep shirt catching on the jagged edges of my shame. I found my father in the kitchen, leaning over a bowl of cereal spoon, clinking like nothing had happened. He glanced up. "Oh, good. You're up." Then, without looking at me again, "It's not your day, Elle. Take it gracefully. Take it gracefully." Like this was a dress they'd chosen not to buy me. Like it was just another Sunday where Corliss got center stage and I was expected to smile from the wings. My hands trembled. I hadn't come back for them. I hadn't RSVP'd to belong. I did it because I believed just once they might see me. But now all I saw was my reflection broken in the glass. A girl who had the audacity to grow too beautiful, too confident, too visible. So they cut me back down. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I reached for my phone fingers, dialing the only person who'd answer without pretending. When we were kids, Corliss had a recital dress in every pastel shade imaginable, mint chiffon petal pink satin, even a lavender tulle gown with tiny pearls sewn at the waist. I had one dress. It was navy, always borrowed. My mother said it was a grounding color and that I looked too grown in lighter tones. Corliss took piano, ballet, fencing, and French. I was given chores. You don't want to spread yourself thin, they told me. Be useful instead. When Corliss turned 16, she got a trip to Santorini. I got a cleaning job at the town library and a warning not to envy what I couldn't afford. I think I was 11 when I first understood that beauty in this house was a resource to be rationed, allowed only when it propped up Corliss's spotlight. My mother once told me flat out, "There's only room for one star in a family and she got here first." So I dimmed myself, bit my tongue, chose soft lipstick, not red, flats instead of heels. I let Corliss shine, but it never made them love me more. It just made me invisible. Still, when her wedding invitation arrived with gold embossing and a handwritten note from Lynette Hope, "You'll say yes," I told myself, maybe this time would be different. Maybe they'd see me not as a problem, but as a guest, a sister, a daughter worth remembering. I said yes. I bought my own dress for the first time, an elegant navy silk slip with a low back and delicate straps. No one approved it. No one even knew. I wanted it to be mine, just mine. I even wrote a few lines for the toast, something light and warm. I practiced it in front of the mirror, smoothing my hair, imagining for once being allowed to speak without being measured. And then I drank that tea. And then I woke up to the cold. And now that dress hung in my closet like a joke, like a costume someone else was supposed to wear. The phone rang 3 times before Nerissa picked up. The memory came back in fragments like someone shaking snow from a windshield. My mother had brought me a mug the night before, steaming and sweet-smelling. Honey lavender, she'd said, to help with those nerves. I remembered taking the first sip, then another. I remembered the heaviness that settled into my limbs like sand. And I remembered thinking, just before everything dimmed, that it tasted oddly familiar, slightly bitter beneath the honey. NyQuil. It had to be. I sat on the edge of my bed, the mug still on my nightstand, ringed with lavender residue. My hair, what remained of it, clung to my shoulders in limp, uneven streaks. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. So I called Nerissa. She arrived in 40 minutes, flat eyes wide, the second she walked in. Jesus, Elle. I tried to smile. It cracked halfway through. Nerissa didn't speak at first. She just circled me slowly like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then, without asking, she pulled out her phone and started taking photos. Angled, close up, full body. I flinched. Why? Because if you don't, they'll say it wasn't that bad. I opened my mouth to object, but she cut me off. They drugged you, she said flatly. They drugged you and hacked your hair off while you slept, so you wouldn't look too good standing next to Corliss in a dress you paid for with your own money. The words hit harder when she said them aloud. I hadn't even let myself string it together like that. I'm not showing up, I whispered. I'll just stay home. Let them have their perfect day. Nerissa lowered her phone. You're not showing up quiet, that's what you meant. I shook my head, but even as I said it, something inside me disagreed. I didn't want revenge, not really. I just wanted space, a little dignity. But the shame that had settled over me was shifting now, solidifying. Nerissa sat beside me gently, lifting one jagged strand of hair. We're not fixing this, she said. We're transforming it. And suddenly I knew I wasn't the one who needed to disappear. The rehearsal brunch was held at a garden estate with string lights draped across wrought iron arches and perfectly trimmed hedges. I arrived with my hair slicked back into a low knot, the jagged edges hidden as best as they could be. Still, heads turned, some out of politeness, some curiosity. No one said anything. Corliss glowed in ivory lace and practiced laughter. She floated from guest to guest like she'd trained for this moment her entire life. My mother, in a pale lemon shift dress, caught sight of me and walked over, pressing a folded piece of paper into my hand. Read this at the brunch toast, she whispered. It says everything you need to say. I opened it. 2 paragraphs of syrupy nothing about how Corliss had always been my guiding light, how I was so lucky to grow up in her shadow, how thrilled I was to watch her marry the love of her life. I stared at the words like they belonged to someone else. There wasn't a single sentence in there that sounded like me, not one acknowledgement of what they'd done. Smile, Lynette murmured, smoothing the edge of my sleeve. Even if you're bitter, let's not ruin Corliss's moment. She was smiling, but it didn't touch her eyes. I stood off to the side while guests took turns fawning over Corliss's ring and floral arrangements. No one asked about my hair. No one asked anything. My phone buzzed in my palm. A text from Nerissa. You're going to destroy them. I'll help. I looked up from the message to see her leaning against a column across the garden. She raised one eyebrow, her expression unreadable, and sipped from a glass of sparkling water. I refolded the speech slowly, carefully pressing each edge until it was a perfect, breathless square. The violinist began warming up. Lynette clapped twice and called out to the guests, All right, everyone, let's move inside for toasts. Corliss gave me a radiant smile, expecting obedience. I smiled back with something sharper, and I followed her inside not to echo their words, but to write my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the brunch, the paper speech, my mother's hushed command to smile, and Nerissa's eyes watching from across the garden like a quiet storm waiting to break. Back in my room, the lights off, I opened the voice memo app on my phone. I hadn't meant to keep those recordings. They started as therapy assignments, capture the little things my therapist had said. Patterns, moments that made me feel off but were too slippery to hold later. There were dozens of clips. Half-formed rants, background audio from family dinners, muted confessions spoken into the dark. One file stood out dated 3 weeks ago. I pressed play. At first it was faint, kitchen clatter. My mother's voice sharper than I remembered. She'll post some photo from that bridal shower and people will say she's prettier than Corliss. We'll take care of it. Silence. Then my father's voice, low and flat. She's just a reminder of our mistakes. Time for scissors. My breath caught. I listened again and again, not for clarity, but to believe it was real. Nerissa, sitting across from me on my bed, looked like someone had just kicked the air out of her lungs. They didn't just do this to humiliate you, she said finally. They did it to erase you. I stared at the phone, my thumb hovering over delete, but I didn't press it. This isn't favoritism, she added. This is emotional mutilation. The word landed hard, and it fit. I'd always told myself I wasn't the favorite, that some families just work that way. But now I had proof, not just of bias, but of deliberate harm. Nerissa leaned forward. You have a choice. You can let them narrate your life, or you can make them hear it. My hand closed around the phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the quiet one in the corner. I felt like a spark with a name and a voice. I opened a blank file and started to record. The next morning, Nerissa laid out her shears clips and a small handheld mirror on my dresser, like tools for battle. Neither of us spoke for a while. She just gently brushed through what was left of my hair, detangling the damage they left behind. I'm not trying to fix it, she murmured. I'm shaping what they couldn't destroy. I sat still as her hands moved with quiet precision, cutting and angling, transforming the mess into something deliberate. My reflection sharpened with each pass of the blade. The asymmetrical bob framed my jawline with intention, bold, clean, defiant. When she finished, Nerissa stepped back, hands on her hips. You don't look like a victim, she said. You look like a reckoning. I turned my head side to side, getting used to the weight, or rather the lack of it. There was a freedom in the loss, a cold clarity in the absence of softness. They hadn't taken something from me. They'd revealed something I hadn't dared to show. By afternoon, I was at my desk, the folded official speech from Lynette still sitting beside me like a ghost. I left it untouched. Instead, I opened a blank page and started writing. Not a toast, not a tribute, a truth. I didn't start with Corliss's engagement story or her favorite color or how we used to play house when we were kids. I started with the lie they taught me that love has to be earned by staying small. And then I ripped that lie apart line by line. I wrote about the tea, about the scissors, about being treated like a threat to the very family I belonged to. I wrote the things no one wanted said aloud at a wedding. I read it back once out loud, pacing the floor with the new version of myself. Then I looked in the mirror again and saw the woman they tried to reduce. But she was standing taller now, and she was about to take the mic. The vineyard was dressed like a dream-long wooden tables, set under arched trellises of white roses, strings of Edison bulbs swaying in the breeze, waiters moving like dancers with trays of champagne and shrimp skewers. I arrived just before the toast segment, my new haircut catching light like flame. No one dared mention it. Lynette glanced at me, once blinked, then turned back to adjust Corliss's sash. Vaughn didn't even look. The microphone sat waiting at the end of the main table just past the wedding cake. My name was on the program, Ilaria Wendell, sister of the bride. When they called me up, the murmurs softened. I could feel the collective breath of the crowd, half expecting some poetic platitude about sisterhood, half too full of rosé to care. I took the mic. I was told to be silent. I began voice steady. To smile, to thank the people who drugged me and cut my hair so I wouldn't steal a moment. Gasps. A fork dropped. I didn't flinch. They said I was a distraction, that my presence might make someone feel smaller, so they made me smaller. But here's what they didn't count on. I pulled out my phone and tapped play. First came Lynette's voice. She'll post a photo and people will say she's prettier than Corliss. We'll take care of it. Then Vaughn. She's just a reminder of our mistakes. Time for scissors. A silence fell thick and unbreathing. Someone at the back of the crowd whispered, "Is this real?" I looked around the vineyard, locking eyes with people I barely knew. Uncles, neighbors, Corliss's friends with their perfect makeup and polite applause now frozen. "You tried to remove me from the picture," I said quietly. "But today, I'm the frame." Lynette collapsed into a chair. Corliss sobbed into her bouquet. Vaughn rose from his seat and shouted something indistinct, angry, irrelevant. 2 staff members approached me, awkward and apologetic. "I'll walk myself out," I said, and handed back the mic. As I crossed the lawn, all I felt was lightness, not from what I'd lost, but from what I no longer carried. And Nerissa was waiting at the gate. Nerissa uploaded the video that night. No hashtags, no captions, just a clean 15-minute clip titled, "What They Did to Me Before My Sister's Wedding." By morning, it had 500,000 views. By afternoon, it was on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Shorn's sister was trending in 4 countries. Comment sections overflowed with shock, outrage, solidarity. Strangers sent voice notes. Artists drew portraits of me in that vineyard with a mic in one hand and shears in the other. Wedding blogs dissected the speech, word for word. One headline read, "When the family toast becomes the family reckoning." I didn't reply to most of it. I didn't need to. The silence I'd lived in for years had ruptured. The echo now belonged to someone else. 2 days later, I got the email from Blythe Viro, editor-in-chief of Brave Grace, a fashion meets feminism publication I'd followed since college. The subject line simply read, "Your voice, your image, your story." In the body, she wrote, "What you said was brave. What they did was cruel. But how you stood there, that was iconic. We want to feature you in a full-spread photography essay interview." The working title, "The Uninvited Sister Who Shined Anyway." Interested, I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "Yes. Absolutely, yes." The shoot was set for the following week. They asked what I wanted to wear, how I wanted to be seen. No one had ever asked me that before. I chose structured deep silhouettes, bold earrings, and bare shoulders. They gave me red lipstick. The makeup artist said, "We don't cover scars here. We frame them." When the camera flashed, I didn't flinch. There was no trace of the girl they'd tried to shrink, just the woman who refused to fit the frame they built for her. And soon that photo would appear on the cover of a magazine my mother used to stack on our coffee table, like trophies. 3 months later, I signed the lease on a corner building with high ceilings and sun-washed floors. It sat directly across the street from the old music academy, where Corliss's piano trophies still hung in the front windows. I used to sit on the curb outside that place waiting for her lessons to end, while my mother lectured me on posture and discretion. Now I walked into my own space carrying blueprints and a clipboard. We named the campaign Uneven Cuts, the hidden abuse behind family loyalty. It started as an art installation, a series of portraits and sound bites from women who'd been told to dim themselves for someone else's comfort. But it grew fast. People wrote in, survivors, daughters, even sons. We built panels, hosted forums, invited therapists and educators to speak. It wasn't just art anymore. It was movement. Blythe backed us fully. Brave Grace sponsored the exhibit and sent a crew to film a short documentary on the project's launch. My face, clean, defiant, unretouched, became the campaign's anchor. On the morning of the ribbon cutting, I stood in the front gallery with Nerissa and my team. Outside, the new vinyl window decal glinted against the glass. Power can't be trimmed. I saw the reflection of the music academy behind me, caught in the glass like an echo. I didn't feel envy. I didn't feel small. I felt like I'd outgrown the conversation. Local press arrived. Then bloggers. Then 3 teenagers from my old high school who came up and asked for internship applications. I showed them where to sign. Later, as we set out drinks and ran mic checks, someone asked if I wanted to prepare an opening speech. I smiled and said no, I already had my say. But I did stand near the doorway watching as the room filled with people I didn't have to shrink around. Their presence was loud in the best way. And then through the window, I saw two familiar silhouettes step onto the sidewalk. They stepped inside just as I finished helping one of the interns hang the final portrait. My mother wore oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. My father held a folded program in his hand like he wasn't sure where to put it. He looked older, thinner, or maybe it was just the way he walked, like the ground no longer belonged to him. They paused by the entrance, scanning the space like visitors in a place they'd once owned. I didn't go to them. Instead, I waited by the back wall near the title piece, a framed print of shears poised mid-cut over a braid, the caption beneath reading control, disguised as care. Eventually, they moved toward me. My father smiled thin and practiced. This place is impressive. Really something. My mother's voice was quieter. We're proud. Can we move past this? I met her eyes. Did you bring scissors? She blinked. What if not? I said, then you're not needed. Her mouth tightened. My father shifted beside her, unsure whether to defend or retreat. I didn't wait for either. I turned to the team setting up near the gallery desk. These are the people I trust now, I said. They build. They don't cut. The room was still buzzing around us, guests arriving, glasses clinking, but it felt like we stood in a soundproof bubble. They turned to leave, awkward and smaller than I'd ever seen them. Just before they reached the door, I called out, not loud but clear enough to be remembered. Next time you try to cut a daughter down to elevate another, remember some blades dull. Some daughters sharpen. They didn't answer. They walked out into the gray afternoon, their silhouettes no longer towering. I looked down at my reflection in the glass of the exit door, layered against the words etched across it. Power can't be trimmed. They never defined my beauty, and now they never get to define my silence.